So as we talk about Proverbs, these are little short sayings, and I've said it before that Proverbs seems to be just misplaced words in groups. It's really not that way. It's pretty organized all the way through. So today as we study chapter 15, let's look at three different segments, if you will. And I really firmly believe that we can put all three of these in our lives today. So chapter 1 tells us kind of what, the guidance, and we talked about the providence, and we talked about the good versus evil, wisdom versus fool, righteousness versus wicked. And now we get to chapter 15, and it's pretty much the same. So chapter 15, verses 1 through 5, is teaching us self-control. I don't want you to raise your hand necessarily, but who struggles with self-control? Well, because you just happened to be there. She asked me why I was looking at her. Are we in agreement? No, I'm teasing. But who suffers with self-control? Everybody does. Sure, it's not an easy thing to do, right? James says that if we could tame our tongue, it's pretty powerful language. I love God's wisdom when He allowed James to use his personality, when he penned those words. Because you have to work really, really hard at misunderstanding James, right? He just says it. So verses 1 through 5 is talking about self-control. And we'll read those and we'll talk about them. So 15:1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of the fools pours forth foolishness. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. A fool despises his father's instruction, but he who receives correction is prudent. A soft answer turns away wrath. What's a soft answer? Could no be a soft answer? Yes, ma'am. She said that it depends on how you express it. The inflection of what we're trying to say, right? Is there tone? Can we say the same words and mean different things? It is so hard for me to send a text because I worry about the tone that you will receive it. Because you don't know how it's written. You don't know if it was humor or if it was serious or if, And the flip side of that, I struggle reading text because I automatically think, well, what the tone was that? What tone are they telling me? So what is the very first sentence? A soft word turns away wrath. We've already read, is it Proverbs 10 or 11 that heaps the coals on them? When they're heaping coals. So what is a soft answer? What is wrath? Yes, sir. That's right. That's a soft answer. Elon said that Christ being crucified before Pilate gave soft answers and very few words. And it was so impressive that he wanted to release him. He didn't even want to crucify him. It turned away the wrath, right? That's a great example. How do we apply that today? Some understanding. Clyde said a soft answer is how the hearer receives it. How do I receive it? Which there's got to be some understanding, there's got to be some knowledge. And I think what Clyde's getting to, and it's where I want to be, is the word love. The soft words have to be generated by love. Right? Because it's going to change your tone if it's love. But a harsh word stirs up what? Anger. So when God wrote Proverbs and he allowed Solomon to use his experiences to pen it, he said a soft answer turns away. Completely gets it going the other direction. Yes, sir, Mr. Curley. Yes, sir. He said that a soft answer is when you're in control. A harsh answer is when you're not. You choose your words. That's exactly right. That's it in a nutshell. So, again, it's teaching self-control. Look at verse 2. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. Another question that you don't necessarily have to answer. Have you ever said words that came out before you thought about them? Got a lot of heads doing this. I'm in that category too. I heard the expression, taste the words first. What does that mean? Think about it. Slow down just a little bit. I've been in sales all my adult life. Y'all know that, except maybe 3 years. So, and then part of it was sales, but I have learned, and I taught this in a class about 2 months ago to some employees that's doing the same job I'm doing. We have to listen to understand, not listen to respond. I mean, there's a lot of power in that. And that wasn't original for me. But that's what Solomon is teaching us here in chapter 2, is to slow down just a little bit, use the understanding that we have from the knowledge, and then the wise words comes out. How difficult is that to do? Yes, sir. That's right. Yes, sir. Brother Lobb said that, we don't listen to understand. We listen for a slight pause so we can interject what we want to say, what we want to talk about. How hard is it for us to apply a soft word and words of wisdom? I think it's getting easier as we mature as Christians, don't you? But look at verse 2, the last part. But the mouth of the fools pours forth foolishness. I didn't look at the original word, pours, but to me, that is like, maybe you get a bucket and you just turn it upside down. What happens? It gushes. Everything comes out. That's the opinion. Opinion's not the right word. That's the impression that I get from Solomon's words. That it doesn't matter what comes out. It's all coming out at one time, and it's just a flood of foolishness. Yes, ma'am. Carol said that another way to interpret that is like a belch out something. It just comes out, usually foul odor after you've eaten something. It just comes out completely. That is the impression. That's the visual that we get. So verses 1 through 5, we have to think about self-control. We have to be able to have the knowledge, the understanding. We've got to say, okay, let me think about that just a minute. Let me pause just a second. Is there anything wrong with you saying in a conversation, Brother Lopp is telling me some words, he's telling me some information, and I say to him, thank you, can I have just a moment? Would you take offense to that? Would you take offense if I asked for a little bit of pause? I'm not good at that. It's tough. I really think that's the application for us today in self-control in the first 5 verses. Yes, and then I'll get you, Miss. Russell says that our society has taught us if we pause like that, it's a sign of weakness. Oh, we've lost the conversation. I don't know what he's talking about. I really got him that time. He's speechless. How many times have y'all known me to be speechless? What? She's shaking her head no. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. Sister DeMonte said that we have to respect the other person. We have to look at their point of view, and it could be right. We don't have to be so hard that our opinion is the only one. We have to be able to pause a little bit and listen. Yes, ma'am. That's very good. She said from a counselor's point of view, she's a retired school counselor, and she taught the volcano effect. Basically, if someone comes in mad, I'm mad, and Josh comes in and he's mad, and we build on it and we build on it, eventually it's going to explode. But if I'm mad and Josh comes in with a kind word or a soft answer, it kind of cools down just a little bit. Oh, it is very hard. And he's just reiterating the fact. He just said that it's so hard to control our anger, control those things. That's the application for us today, is 1 through 5 is self-control, right? If you look at it like a pot, sometimes we make spaghetti. We like spaghetti at our house. We have to have some boiling water, right? When you get boiling water, it's boiling everywhere. But when you put the spaghetti noodles in, what happens? It simmers down a little bit, right? That's what the application for us today is when Solomon is saying to us in these first 5 verses. Anything else on these first 5 verses? Yes, sir. Sure. He referenced John 8 talking about, the lady and what do we do? The law says kill her a couple of times. And they kept pressing Jesus, and Jesus finally said, cast the first stone if you have no sin. Broke eye contact, and then it dispersed. A soft answer. Yes, sir, Claude. Right. He said, basically for this conversation, this discussion, that if you're in a situation, it may be better just to part. Think about it, and because you're not going to have any outcome except an argument. So there's some patience there, right? Yes, sir, Steve. Well, that's a really good point. He said a boiling water, you get a pot and your kettle is hot, you put an egg in it, you put a potato in it, and you put coffee in it. The egg becomes hard, the potatoes come soft, but the coffee changes the water. We should be the coffee. We shouldn't let the boiling water change us. Yes, ma'am. I agree with that. She said that we have to allow the Lord's influence, the Lord's truth, to change our life, that we can be the example in that situation. And we can be the soft word example. And once we're that example, we don't necessarily even have to get the last word, which is a very good point. Now, how hard is that to get the last word? Who wants the last word? Let me get Miss Barbara and I'll come to you. That's right. That's it. She said that you have to say it again. Pray about it before you say it. Don't just say it. And you don't have to apologize for something that you didn't say, right? Yes, ma'am. Carol said that if you're saying the correct words and you're saying them out of arrogance or hate or whatever, those words are falling on deaf ears. They don't mean anything. They're vain, basically. She didn't use the word vain, but that's the context. Turn over to chapter 17 of Proverbs, and we'll get there in a couple of weeks. But there's a verse that I want to look at in this context of the first 5 verses of 15. Chapter 17, verse 28. This is a consensus of what we've just been discussing, okay? Here's the teaching. Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. When he shuts his lips, he is considered what? Perceptive, or of a man of understanding. Even if you are a fool, you can be considered wise by what? Keeping your mouth closed. Pray about it, like Miss Barbara taught, right? Just because we have the ability to speak doesn't always mean that we have to. Just because we have the ability to speak doesn't mean we always have to. Yes, ma'am.
I've always been taught we have 2 ears and 1 mouth is in proportion.
That's it. Yeah, she said that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in proportion. So basically it's teaching us what? Listen twice as much. Right? Oh, it's definitely hard, for sure. It's tough. It really is. And I think that Solomon does a good job because of his activity that he participated in through his life. He's speaking from real life experience. And that's the advice that I think that we should learn from. And that's what chapter 15 verses 6 through 12 is teaching us. It contrasts righteousness and wicked. 6 through 12 contrast wicked and righteous. And we've talked about what is righteous. We've talked about what's wicked, right? We understand that. So for the sake of time, let's just read a few verses with these in mind. Look at verse 6. In the house of the righteous, there is what? Much treasure. But the revenue of the wicked is trouble. Again, a sharp contrast between righteousness and wickedness. Look at verse 9. The way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but He loves him who follows what? What is an abomination? What is that word? How do you use that today? She said, God hates sin. And that's exactly what an abomination is. It's wicked. And it's opposite of righteousness. Look at verse 10. I think in this context of the verses 6 through 12, this is the hinge because it's the sharp contrast between wicked and righteous. Notice what it's teaching. Harsh discipline is for him who forsakes the way, and he who hates correction will die. Is that not teaching that the wicked will be destroyed? How are we destroyed? How are we saved? The new law, the New Testament, is the way that we follow righteousness. Solomon was trying to teach to follow what is good, what is spiritual. We need to, in all situations, do whatever we do by the authority of Jesus Christ. Solomon was under a different law than we are. But Solomon was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing, right?
He was still subject to God.
That's it. Clyde said he was still subject to God. And that's exactly right. So, and then look at verse 12. A scoffer does not love one who corrects him, nor will he go to the wise. Have you ever sought advice? Have you ever called someone and said, hey, would you advise me on this? Or have you ever read advice? That's a good thing to do, in my opinion, is to get sound, sage advice, not just advice from the wicked, right? How do we obtain knowledge? Through the Word. How do we obtain secular knowledge? What's 2 plus 2? Experience. He said experience. Study. At some point, both of those have to come together, right? We have to study. We have to have experience. We get the knowledge. So, if I wanted to raise a garden, I don't know that I would go to someone in Metro Nashville that lives in a high-rise and say, hey, can you teach me how to raise tomatoes? They may have some background. They may be a farmer and move to the city. What I'm saying is you find someone that has the knowledge because they may be a little potting soil under their fingernails. Oh, good. We planted a garden one time and we raised a bunch of rocks. So, yes, sir. He referenced 1 Kings 11, talking about the abomination of the sin of God that Solomon allowed, basically to sacrifice children, to worship false gods. And he don't know for sure when the timing was written, the book of Proverbs. Was it when he was in good graces with God or when he was not? But basically, the point is, even if we're wise, we have to obey God. And he was choosing not to be wise in that situation. So the first 5 verses is self-control. 6 through 12 is talking about a contrast between good and evil. And then the majority of this chapter, the rest of the verses from 13 to 33, is giving us individual segments of wisdom. Basically, each verse is a nugget of wisdom. And careful planning, seeking advice, hard work, and righteousness is commended. And then laziness, impatience, arrogance, hypocrisy is all condemned in these verses. Let's just try to read them. I think God's already given us the words. He can say it way better than I can. So let's just read these verses and we'll go from there with the time that we have remaining. Verse 13. A merry heart makes a cheerful countenance, but the sorrow of the heart, the spirit is broken. The heart of him who has understanding seeks knowledge, but the mouth of fools feeds on foolishness. All the days of the afflicted are evil, but he who is of a merry heart has a continual feast. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure with trouble. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a fatted calf with hatred. A wrathful man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger allies contention. The way of the lazy man is like a hedge of thorns, but the way of the upright is a highway. A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish man despises his mother. Folly is joy to him who is... Thank you. I was just seeing if y'all are paying attention. Sometimes they just don't come out. Sorry. Destitute of discernment, but a man of understanding walks uprightly. Without counsel, plans go awry, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. A man has joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good it is. The way of life wins upward for the wise, that he may turn away from hell below. The Lord will destroy the house of the proud, and he will establish the bounty of the widow. The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord, but the words of the pure are pleasant. He who is greedy for gain troubles his own house, but he who hates bribes will live. The heart of the righteous studies how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours forth evil. The Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous. The light of the eyes rejoices the heart. A good report makes the bones healthy. The ear that hears the rebukes of life will abide among the wise. He who disdains instruction despises his own soul, but he who needs rebuke gets understanding. The fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility. So we're looking at things that is good, looking at things that are bad. Laziness, arrogance, hypocrisy, all condemned. Well planned, getting advice, it's all commended, right? We saw it in these verses. So look at verse 16. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasures with trouble. Could that be teaching us today to be content? Absolutely. Are we content? I think we are content as a whole. Now, is there anything wrong with wanting to improve? No. And that's not a contradiction, is it? Can we be content? Okay, exactly. She said it depends on how we go about it, according to the way our mindset is. What do you mean, right? It is, yeah, it has to be a motivation, right? Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a fatted calf with hatred. What's it teaching us? That's pretty good. That's a pretty good meal. Turnip greens and steak. I'd eat that today. You don't like turnip greens, evidently. Yeah. But the point is, Brother Live said that we could sit down with turnip greens and be. Oh yeah, amen, brother. Yeah, he's found it. Boiled okra. We'd have to have a lot of love. A lot of love. I love fried okra, but I believe I'd eat it raw before I'd eat it boiled. So, but basically his comment was, whatever we don't like, the boiled okra, it's better for us if there's love behind it. Right? And that's what it's teaching. Look at verse 22. Without counsel, plans go awry, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. What is the word awry? Have you used it last week? Have you used it this month? To stray, to go away from, right? Without counsel, plans go astray. But in the multitude of counselors, they are established. What is a multitude of counselors? What is a multitude of counselors? It's more than one opinion, she said. It's more than one set of facts. It's more than Beth and I talking and her giving me how to grow tomatoes. Beth would probably say, you need to go ask Miss Betty. You know, that's a multitude of counselors. I'm not picking on Beth. But is it not teaching us that we have to learn some knowledge to get some understanding what is good advice? Don't jump out of an airplane without a parachute. Is that good advice? The better advice is, why do you want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane? It's just a pit.
There's good counselors and not so good.
Exactly.
Like Rehoboam, he listened to a lot of counselors, but they were a bunch of knuckleheads.
Brother Lieb said that there is good counselors and bad counselors. And he referenced Rehoboam, and he listens to several knuckleheads. They wasn't giving him good advice, right? So how do we... Yes, ma'am. Sure. Yeah, she said that sometimes their heart may be right and the counsel that you have given may be incorrect for whatever reason. It may be a selfish motivation on the words coming to us. Yes, Diane. Sure, I can't either. She referenced the scripture where counting the cost. Luke 14. Luke 14. Counting the cost. Yes, exactly. She said that basically there's a lot of bad counselors, wrong counselors, false teaching. If you see something on TV and you do a certain thing, you'll be saved. Well, that's not right, obviously. So we have to understand what is good counsel versus bad counsel. And the standard is God's Word. Yes, Miss Barbara. That's right. She said that basically that's the reason that it's a multitude of counselors, is because if we have a multitude of it, God's standard, we're going to get the right counsel. We have to understand. Here's my last sentence for today and for this chapter. We cannot study chapter 15 without studying verse 33. That is where it begins. That's where it ends. The fear of the Lord is the what? Instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility. So if you're what? If you're humble and you have knowledge and understanding and you fear the God, the only God, you fear Him to the point of obedience, we will have instruction or sound advice, right? Thank you very much for your comments. We'll try to do 16 next week.